Hi everyone, my name is Sean McBride. I'm here with William Meneses, Community Engagement Lead and Peer Specialist with Toronto Community Crisis Service. And thank you for joining us today on Breaking the Silence. William, awesome to have you here.
Thank you.
As I've told you 100 times, I'm so grateful for the work you do for our community, for Toronto, for the people who don't have a voice and don't have the help that they need. I think what you're doing is remarkable and brave. Thanks a lot for being here. I was telling you earlier, one of the big things that you brought up with me, and I'm no shame in admitting, is emotion fatigue. Mm-hmm. Now, is it emotion fatigue syndrome or just emotional fatigue, or?
Yeah, well, it's compassion fatigue.
Compassion fatigue. See, look at that. Maybe I have it again. Yeah,
and so it's it's something that strikes a lot of people, especially caregivers, service providers. We think of it as as service providers, we sometimes feel that we can be immune to that because we work on the other side of the of the service desk. And no, we're the ones that provide hope. We're the ones that provide that support. We know the techniques. We know. But it's kind of like, well, everyone needs that support. That's why, your psychiatrist has a psychiatrist. That's true. Why you're,
That's true.
Because we need to really process the things that we're seeing and process the things that we're encountering. And with caregivers too, especially with family caregivers who are looking over either, adult children with special needs, or going through, supporting their child through mental wellness challenges, or whether it's taking care of senior parents, those caregivers, it just becomes a lot. Your emotions are very much invested, and the experience is just, you just hold that in, right?
Yeah.
And for our crisis team and for other frontline workers, and even our case management team and service providers across the board, we're in it all the time. And so it gets to a point where we live in, we kind of rise and fall with how our service users are doing.
Yeah, I could imagine.
So it becomes challenging. We take that home with us. We take the things that, we take it home with us. Again, coupled with that too is the secondary trauma or vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
And those are just the day in and day out of supporting or being present or listening to a lot of traumatic events and a lot of times generational trauma, and we're trying to support individuals through, or other service providers are doing the same, trying to support individuals through this crisis, and it's the stuff that keeps you up at night.
I can imagine, and I couldn't imagine just from working where I work. We see it a lot, but being right there in the thick of it, I mean, it's huge. Like I told you earlier, I've talked to ambulance drivers, paramedics, I've talked to police, and, I don't think the average person can possibly comprehend how much, emotional grit and rigor it takes. I'd imagine it's almost a double-edged sword, right? Because you have to care in order to be engaging and to be invested, but you can't be so invested, like you said, that you start to take on that trauma yourself, right? Do you find that there are you guys taught methods of detachment, or is it just, hey, do your best not to get stuck with it? Or With me, I do the best to encourage the conversations. I do the best to encourage sharing stories. Not necessarily like the nitty gritty or that we call them the war stories. Yeah,
I'm not really interested in the war stories. We're interested in how those situations made you feel, what questions that it left you with, and because it can be quite heavy, and we are asking big questions. Questions. I know for myself, when I started working in the mental health field, and I think I mentioned this earlier today to another service provider, which was, it almost felt like you were being kind of thrown into action, you know, and without having any information, or not having any tools. It's just like, all right, now go help people
and be helpful.
Be helpful. Go do good. And we, you know, and that is the motivating factor. That's why we do, you know, the job that we do, is because we do want to help. We do want to make a difference. And we know what it looks like when those supports aren't there. Yeah. Right. But, you know, in the past, it's very much been, you know, the suck it up buttercup type of mentality. Yeah. And this goes across to like all caregivers, right? You just need tougher skin. Okay, to an extent. Yeah. But there's things that we need to process. We need to build that resilience, and that resilience comes from understanding, from being able to cope, from being able to make sense of what's happening. And a lot of times there is no real sense of like...
Walk it off.
Yeah. There is no, you know, there's nothing that you can shake off. It's something that needs to be processed, or something that needs to be learned or taken away from. Yeah.
You can't walk off 20 years of drug abuse, or 20 years of, you know, this or that. Like, I totally agree, and you know, I think we come very much from that same generation, you know. And do you find that, because I know here, you know, I would say probably healthily at least 90% of our clientele is male. Do you find that you have a lot more male calls than female, or is it even mix? Or
so I would say, like with our calls, the ones that are more hesitant to, you know, again, males seem to be more hesitant to ask for help, or you know, there is that stigma still very much with you know,
be a man.
Exactly. That's
it's a terrible saying, but that's exactly what I grew up with, and I know for me, you know, it was always, I'll give you something to cry about, was one that puzzled me. I was like, well, I'm already upset, and now you're telling me you're going to give me something even great, like no. And you're right, like, you know, walk it off and toughen up and be a man and all these things.
And that's kind of how, again, you know, in the past, that's how, you know, men processing their emotions or processing their pains. That's what it was, right? Yeah. And you know, I know, like, I, you know, speak for myself. In my community, the best way men can process their emotions is by drinking and fighting. That is, you know, that's how you do it. That's
I've got an Irish background. Yeah, 100%.
That's the playbook, right?
Yeah, you know, just bury it all. And hide behind, you know, toxic masculinity, and everything will go away.
Yeah. And you know, and sadly we still see that those ideas still around, right? And we talk about, like, you know, this, you know, idea of like the manosphere, and you know, online, and how it can be quite. It is quite toxic, and the one thing that I found too in my own journey is those ideas of toxic masculinity. Really, it's something that you yourself are a victim of. It's something, you know, it's not like, it's just, the way, you know, you treat others, or the way you look down on women, or the way it's really like you're also being imprisoned by these confines, for sure. and by the, you know, the social construct, for sure. And it doesn't help. It doesn't help anything. It makes things worse. You know, and so trying to bring that down and really be more mindful, or you know, of our feelings, or men be more mindful of their feelings and how their feelings are impacting others. You know, and it is challenging, right? It is challenging because it is again, multi-generational, this approach, right? For sure. And it is hard to like on a dime, just kind of like, well, I'm not
not gonna be that way. It's okay. My whole life fell apart. Walk it off. You know, gonna have a few drinks, everything's good.
But it is that, you know, you mentioned before about this idea of mindfulness, right? Of being mindful of our actions, being mindful of how they impact others, being mindful on the trauma that we are possibly putting on others because of our not dealing with our emotions in a constructive
poor
way.
Processing. I agree 100%. And it's interesting too, like I was telling you earlier, you know, it's the whole, we pour from an empty cup. And I think you're right. Like a lot of it is we're just not shown another way. You know, it's just don't let your emotions show and just take care of everybody around you. Like for me, I was always taught if I take care of everybody around me, then everybody around me is going to take care of me. And it's not the case when it comes to emotions, when it comes to, you know, limited mental health, right? Like, I feel like you're only given X amount of energy per day in your soul, whatever you want to call it. And if you're constantly dumping it out, you know, what are you doing to replenish that at the end of the day? And I've told you, you know, just from my own personal experience, that's exactly what happened to me. For years, you know, I was under the impression that this was just normal. You know, this is what guys do, right? This is the man's position, the husband's position, whatever. And it didn't dawn on me that it's not about man or woman. I'm breaking inside and I'm pretending everything's fine on the outside. And so that's why I was asking you about, you know, do you find you have more of a percentage or not? And the same thing here, right? Like with addiction, you know, like a lot of men are ashamed to say, well, this, you know, little substance has such a big hold over my life, you know? So, yeah. I was going to say, I know we were talking about how many calls you guys handle, and I really had no idea. I mean, that's massive. Do you find like there's an age group specifically? Like, is it more like in the 30s to 50s, or is it younger? Or?
We support, and you know, everyone's 16 and older. So that is pretty much the range of the calls. We, you know, we've supported, you know, conversations at schools as well. We've, you know, supported seniors as well, which is sadly it's a growing, you know, it's a growing population of need. And we've, you know, I think this is one of the things that we, you know, take super pride in is being able to pull individuals out of abusive situations.
That is huge.
And that is very, very huge, of being there and having that support, right? Of being able to call and having that support. It's you know, it is sad because, I mean, we, you know, it breaks our hearts because it is, you know, there are individuals who have, you know, basically raised families and built communities, and now are in, you know, maybe, you know, in a little bit of, you know, age-related decline. Maybe it could be the onsets of, you know, dementia,
Alzheimer's, stuff like
that. And then, you know, which is, once we're able to identify it, or once, you know, the individual too is able to identify, oh, I'm going through a little bit of this, maybe there's, you know, there can be treatments to mitigate it, or treatments to, but it goes back to that thing of like that like, I'm going to do it myself. I'm fine. I can do it myself. I'm fine. Right. And, you know, I guess it's fitting, like, you know, this idea of like, it's okay not to be fine. Right? It's okay. You know, we all go through points in our life where we need help, where we need support.
Big time.
Yeah, and so it's just a matter of again, breaking down the you know, the stigma of those you know, of those situations, of those challenges. You know, to be able to be okay to ask for help. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's true too, and you know, I know we talked a lot about, you know, the masculine side of things, but it's true for anybody, you know. And I think also even just admitting, they always say, "Oh, go ahead."
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that there's, you know, again, extreme social pressures on, you know, on women, and to look a certain way, be a certain way, do a certain thing. Even though there is a lot. You know, the conversation is definitely spread more into accepting ourselves, you know, accepting, you know, person is who they are, accepting, you know, how, you know, accepting our body differences. Like, there's no mold, right? So that conversation is starting to have, but again, it's like you said, it's a racing, you know, 20 years of, you know, but this is a lot more than 20 years. This is centuries.
Centuries old.
And
especially with social media and everything, and expectation, and no, it's
and again, as we were talking about toxic masculinity, how toxic masculinity feeds into that as well.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and so really finding a way to live that is more conducive to our wellness, more conducive to our happiness, where we're not feeling like we have to be a certain way, look a certain way, express a certain way. There needs to be a little bit of that individuality
For sure.
that comes out, and that individuality that is supportive and understanding and accepting of differences and of others, and because we are a society, we are, one thing I love, like I was born and raised in Toronto, and one of the things I love about this city is the diversity.
Agree.
I've had the pleasure before Toronto became very traffic congested.
Yeah.
Of being able to like go on like whims with just like, hey, I'm gonna go to this side of town and let's have a meal, or let's go to this side of town and let's grab this kind of food and have a conversation with the especially the mom and pop shops, because you're gonna get like these stories, and you're gonna get like and there is that joy that comes from sharing one's culture and sharing
100%.
one's experiences, and especially food, right? So
food's a common language, man. Yeah, absolutely.
So I've got to learn so much about different cultures and different different socioeconomic situations, different because of the city the way it was, or the city the way it was when I grew up in it, I think a lot has changed, and a lot has changed. Some has changed for the better. Some has changed, become more, again, the traffic getting everywhere. That's the only
and construction. So much construction.
Yeah, but and those things also they tug on our emotions as well.
No.
I mean, I'm not immune to throwing out the few curse words here and there when I'm trying to get to work, or I'm trying to get to an appointment.
For sure.
And, so now it's me trying to be able to refocus after that little bit, and just trying to refocus. Okay, you don't.
It's so funny because literally earlier the podcast that I had with Natasha Ramlal, we were talking about it, and she actually did a workshop for us, and part of it was the healthy expression of anger. That's really what our podcast was about. And I said, before I did your workshop, I said my biggest pet peeve was driving in a lane and I can see 4 blocks away it's closed off, so I make the appropriate move. And then I can't stand that person who just for some reason thinks like the barricade's going to move just as they get there, and now they're trying to come into me. And I told her, I said, the best part that your workshop has done is now, I still get pissed off at it. Like, I'm not going to lie. But before, it would have been 6 or 7 blocks down the road before I'm like, that freaking guy, and I don't say freaking. But now it's more like it happens, and within a block, I'm like, it happened. And I think that is a big thing, what we were talking about processing, is like you said, if you don't take note of how you feel, where you feel it, what it feels like, even with my kids all the time, when they say I'm angry, I'm like, well, what does that anger look like? If you could give it, the typical psychology, if you could give it a color, if you could give it a shape, when you start to actually give it form, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's not anger, maybe I'm hungry, maybe, maybe I didn't sleep well, or, and you start to realize, maybe that person who cut me off, maybe I'm not really angry at them, maybe I'm just in a grumpy mood. And then the second part to what you said is, and that's okay. I don't have to be this happy-go-lucky person. In fact, I actually probably distrust that happy-go-lucky person that nothing ever affects them, because then I'm like, that's the kind of person who I think is really not well, because they're not acknowledging any other feeling but just absence of recognition. So but like I said before, to start this all off, I think the work you guys are doing is huge. For anybody out there, support absolutely the TCCS, CMHA, get in contact with these people, volunteer if you can, donate, whatever you can do, because really, I mean, the stuff you guys are doing, I think people, do you guys ever do ride-alongs? You ever bring someone along to see? I don't know if you could, but
well, given the we're well, I mean, like all our staff, we do like the trainings, and so and supervisions and that sort of thing. Yeah, we definitely do ride-alongs, but we haven't really done anything with the public.
Yeah.
Again, given the confidentiality and the
for sure, the sensitive nature.
Yeah, that we're supporting. We always we kind of shy away from that. Just because we want people to feel comfortable in sharing. And
that makes sense.
And it's already a lot of those situations are they can be very escalated. Someone can again be under the influence.
True.
Can be again those we're talking about, like they could also be hungry. They could be
hangry.
There could be all these different little factors, right? They got cut off in traffic coming home. Had a drink. One turned to two. Something they saw on the news upset them. And then it just becomes like escalation.
Yeah.
And so being able to go in and just kind of like provide that support and really show options, right? Show options for care and in a sensitive way. Which I think is, because we're community led, because we're, we represent, again, the communities that we work in.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic to be able to go in and have that cultural sensitivity, have that
definitely needed.
The knowing the workings of the neighborhood and know what the individual, or have a better idea of what the individual is experiencing on a day-to-day in order to be able to support and offer those supports.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I was mainly asking about the ride-along to see if I could come. I can picture what you guys do in a day, and it's like, it actually fascinates me from the other point of view, is like, I wonder how much help I could be to someone. So, but no, thank you so much for joining us here today. What's the best way for people out there to get in touch with you should they need your services?
For sure. I would say, we're, Toronto Community Crisis Service, we support Toronto, border to border, and you can connect through 211. If you're in distress or you need some support, by all means, reach out. 211. They're a fantastic resource because they will also, I always use we have this idea of like a concept of the no wrong door approach. And 211 works, we work hand in hand with them very, it's perfect because, someone may call being like, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling scared, I'm having, like really these big emotions. And, you'd be able to talk to someone and goes, okay, well, tell me what's going on. It's like, well, I'm late on my rent. I'm, the food's, I don't have enough food. My landlord's giving me, some challenges. And it's like, okay, well, it sounds like you're dealing with a lot. There's a lot on your plate. We're going to send out a crisis team, but we're also going to give you the number to the Toronto Rent Bank. We're going to give you the number to the closest, food donation center. We're going to give you, give you the connection to, home support or groups for, tenant board and that sort of thing. And so you can leave that call with information. You can leave that call with options as opposed to being in those emotions and feeling overwhelmed with all these challenges. It goes a long way to know that there's supports out there and there's individuals who, can empathize, can relate to what's going on, and can provide some support and maybe some navigation. Our CMHA's branch has case management attached to its crisis service. Nice. So having that wraparound support is so important because neutralizing or trying to intervene on a crisis situation is great. And now we want to address
follow up.
Why what were the challenges that led up to that moment, and really provide that support.
That's awesome.
So
it's awesome. William Meneses, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Keep up your amazing work.
You
and thank you all for joining us. And happy trails. Awesome.